welcome to Conversations with Carrot. I am Carrot Sampson, bereavement counselor with the Belgroves group. Today we acknowledge National Men in Grief Day, a time set aside to recognize the often overlooked and misunderstood experience of men who grieve. Focusing today on the often silent journey that men travel while navigating loss. So joining me in conversation is Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh, founder of International Men's Day. This was founded in 1999 and is observed on November 19th. He's also the founder of World's Day of the Boy Child. That was founded in 2018 and is observed on May 16th. Additionally, Dr. Tilak Singh founded the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Men and Boys. This was founded in 2020 and is celebrated on January 31st. Welcome, Dr. Tilak Singh.
Thank you very much.
As a bereavement counselor, I recognize that grieving men, especially in the Caribbean, often face emotional challenges, both rooted from cultural experiences, and a lot of it comes through to based on their masculinity. Men are taught from young to suppress what we call feelings, and they're taught that crying is normally not expressed, especially publicly. And while in the Caribbean culture, we often look at the community in which men are brought up in, and they're told, hold it together, especially when they experience grief. For them to come to persons like myself who would assist them in counseling often seems unreal. So the unlikelihood of them coming for support is real. Within recent times, I have initiated a blog. It's called Meet Me at the Fence. Why? Because we, as Caribbean people, know that that is a meeting place. We also know that a meeting place would be, as you go to the barber shop. For some reason, men do feel comfortable speaking there. Maybe because they're not being judged. Who knows? As I mentioned earlier, I do have with me Dr. Tilak Singh. Dr. Tilak Singh, I would like to pose a question to you. In your capacity as a historian, founder of International Men's Day, World's Day of the Boy Child, do you believe that there is a correlation between the historical and societal expectations placed on the Caribbean men that has shaped how they deal with grief?
Thank you very much for that question. Very interesting. And from my research, I've realized that from earliest times, men were supposed to be tough. Men were supposed to be the warriors, the protector of the tribe. And I've realized that I've been doing some research with boys at kindergarten and primary schools. And it's so unfortunate that crying is seen as something feminine. They expect the girls to cry. The boy falls down and they expect him to pick himself up and continue running. He gets maybe a buff, verbal abuse, a slap. They don't expect him to cry. He's bullied. They expect him to take that, to man up. And I've realized that that socialization from early childhood affects manhood. And many men have this pent-up emotion. It's very interesting, eh? Men could express anger. We call it toxic masculinity. Men could express hate. They could experience discrimination. But when it comes to something expressing hurt and pain, society has stereotyped that as a sign of weakness.
Correct.
And sometimes they call the boy a sissy in school. Man up. So I have realized that it is something that damages the psyche of the man. The mental health of the man doesn't happen in adulthood. It occurs at an early age. As babies, boy and girl babies crying. But at about 4 years, that very fragile upbringing is when boys are not allowed to cry. You know, sometimes I've seen cases where both fathers and mothers, uncles and nephews, are very harsh on the young males in the family. They expect that boy to continue the generation, you know, to represent the family.
Right, yeah.
And it is something across the board. I see it amongst Hindu cultures, Muslim cultures, Christians, and I think it's something that we need to deal with. And I'm very glad that the Belgroves Funeral Home is observing men in grief, this special day, and I'm so glad that, you know, it is being observed here in Trinidad and Tobago. I have been working with various men's groups in Canada and across the world, in the Caribbean, and these groups, they don't just focus on masculinity, but they are part of their work deals with grief and healing.
I thank you, and I want to just regress just a little bit. I know this is about men, but strangely enough, within the Caribbean society, what you find happening is that parents are now engaging the girl child in toughening up. So we become now persons that we don't even know have feelings because, hey, we cannot continue to be that soft person. So, you know, it's a give and take. Yeah? I know at this time you would have had a question for me.
Yes. I was wondering, how do you all deal with men in grief? You know, and from your experience, you know, how do you tell family and friends to console men who are in grief? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that question. I have been to funerals, temples, churches, mosques. I've been at the gravesite. I've been at the crematorium. And I've seen men not shed a tear. Their wives died, their sisters, their brothers, nephews, uncles. But they would cry outside the religious institution. They cry outside the gravesite. And I am wondering, you know, how do you deal with that? How could you re-socialize, change the narrative, and allow men to express that grief that they have pent up? And how could they express it publicly without fear?
Yeah, I think the last part of the question is the more important one. How do they express it publicly? And we were getting there. We're getting there where men are no longer holding back that pain that they experience. As a bereavement counselor, often you would find that calls to the family home, a lot of the men who have lost their spouses or have lost their children, their first reaction would be, I'm okay. I don't need this. I am already healing. And the conversation would start that I don't need this. And I remember being on the phone on several occasions after hours talking to that same person who did not need that counseling. Yeah? So as we try to encourage them, we have to come to terms with what their anger looks like. Sometimes their anger coming from a place of guilt. What does that look like? How does that feel? And how do we allow them to express it? We can only do that by listening attentively, by allowing them, by being patient with them, but not putting pressure on them. Allowing them to come to us and we not go to them. You know, we have a habit as parents, and especially in the Caribbean, you know, you okay today, son? And an hour after, you okay today, son? No. Sometimes when we pay attention more to what the man is not saying, we hear so much more about their grief journey. So part of our culture speaks to them, yes, not being, you should not cry, and you should not exhale, and you should not feel that pain, but they do. And we have to allow them to express that. What we do not want them to do is to go to a place where in finding or healing, they turn to things like alcohol and further abuse, and to some extent, some levels of promiscuity. Because for them, it is one way of getting rid of that inner feeling.
Masking that pain.
Correct. and placing it on something else. Some men actually who prefer not to be heard decide to be, doers instead of sayers. Okay, so I'm going to work, I'm going to do this, I'm going to finish this task, and I'm going to finish this task, and that is them releasing that pain. And we have to appreciate that. So the more we pressure them, the less we would hear.
Yeah. I think what I think is needed is a day of grief for boys. Because when a boy loses his father, the boy is grieving, and he doesn't have that support system. Sometimes he loses a classmate. Sometimes it could be a simple thing like a pet. And that grief that is unresolved in that boy, because he loses a dog, a fish, sometimes he loses an uncle, a grandfather. We tend to focus on adults in our society. And I really believe that it is something that maybe we could initiate, maybe the Belgroves Funeral Home, and I'd be glad to support it. A day where we could also try to focus on the boys, because many boys are grieving and their parents don't understand. Sometimes the parents don't have time to even carry the boys by a counselor or a psychologist or a therapist. So I am seeing from my research and my interaction, my exposure when I go to seminars and workshops, I'm seeing that there's an increasing number of grief in boys and men. And I'll tell you something, it's not just within that space of death and funerals.
Correct.
Sometimes a man loses a job. Sometimes he's injured in an accident. Sometimes he has to support a wife who might have Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. So I'm seeing where this grief that you all are doing at Belgroves Funeral Home has a lot of potential for other sectors to continue doing, employers.
Yeah, and that being said, I think what the public should be aware of is that grief comes from a place of loss of anything you have become accustomed to. So death within the funeral home may just be one of those aspects. I kid you not, on the several occasions that I speak to persons, the death of the loved one may be the initial reason for contacting me, but the grief comes from loss of something quite deeper. So understand, my journey with a client is not just talking about mommy died or daddy died. It sometimes ends up with, I was ill-treated, physically, mentally, sexually, and that loss is what I now feel. Not just about death, it's loss of limb, it's loss of eyesight. We talk about retirement and people not being prepared even for retirement. So anything that changes over time that you have not put in your mental capacity to take care of causes you that level of pain. And we talk about, the emotions relative to grief. We talk about the anger, the disbelief, the guilt. It's all associated not just with death, but with loss.
And these services that you all provide at Belgroves, is it free, these counseling services?
We do provide free bereavement counseling services for persons, yes, who have used our organization. And I would tell a little tale. It is not just so much about them receiving the counseling, but them healing.
Right.
So the journey must be one in which you have engaged our services and you have left here feeling a little bit more capable to continue life in spite of.
I was wondering, you might not know, do other funeral homes also provide these services, or are you all pioneering this area?
In terms of grief counseling, the Belgroves Funeral Home, and I'm just going to say this loud and clear, the Belgroves Funeral Home is the only funeral provider with a qualified bereavement counselor on board. I know that there are other funeral homes who would probably direct you to a psychologist. We have one on board, yeah? So that, yes, we are first in many things. This is one of our many first.
And just for my clarification, is this the first time that the Belgroves Funeral Home is observing the National Day of Men in Grief on the 30th?
Yeah, yes, and again, because we tend to not see them. And because of my interaction, it says that they need to be seen. They feel the pain just like everyone else. We have men committing suicide for whatever reason. I deal with a lot of young people who self-harm as well. Again, another way of releasing that pain. How can we just sit by and not acknowledge that pain and allow them to go through that on their own? So this is an avenue. To reach out to them, to give them a safe place where they can come and have a listening ear and feel that they're not being judged because of their circumstances.
Right. This is wonderful work you're doing, and it's so important. It's an important contribution, especially where we live in a society where there's so much debt, so much violence, you know, and all these are connected to the grief. So I'm really glad that you all are doing this at Belgroves Funeral Home.
Correct. Yeah. And it becomes important not just so for the person who is experiencing the loss, but the persons who have to assist them in coping. How does the family then assist that person as they go through that journey? So it's not just, you know, a son coming for counseling. Regardless of the fact that you're underage, you may be, you know, not the age 18, but the fact of the matter is it has to be a family thing.
Right, I agree.
If I am going through it, then you need to go through it with me. So that when you see me shut a door and I don't come out to eat in the morning and the room is untidy and I find you being a bother, know that that is part of their grieving process. And regardless of the age, 18 to 85, the same thing happens. So pay attention. And I think this National Men in Grief Day identifies with men being heard.
I think it's very important that men get that space to grieve.
Correct.
And I'm so glad that Belgroves Funeral Home is providing that space, a much needed space. They need to grieve in public and be free and open to grieve in public.
And that day is coming. I don't know that, except for we ladies, we would sit down and really exhale. But you do see the men now feeling a little bit more comfortable to shed a tear. Maybe turn your back and shed a tear, but they still shed a tear. And sometimes they just need to know that it's okay to do that, that you're not going to be judged based on that. Yeah? I am totally enjoying the conversation as we go along. But I need to pose to you another question. Yes. So my question to you is, what does it look like to create a cultural relevant space for men to talk without judgment?
It's difficult to create that space. And the reason being is because we live in a society which is so diverse, in that we cannot simply say, you know, this is the blueprint and I'm going to implement this blueprint, because men are so different. We all are so different. We have different ways to grieve, right? In fact, some men might feel they're grieving privately and they might grieve privately and they recover. But what I've realized is that we have these various ethnic groups, we have various religions, people from different class structures. And, you know, sometimes we would say, you know what, we're going to have a special room, we're going to have a special session for you to grieve. So I think what we need to provide that public space for those who want to grieve publicly. And we also have to encourage men to grieve, be it privately. You know, because sometimes even privately I notice that when men are in their homes, they often, you know, don't want to cry in front of their children. You know, because they are the breadwinner, they are the man in the family, the father in the family, the father figure. So I think what I think we need to do is try to allow society to understand that crying is not a sign of weakness.
Correct.
And we need to get that message, be it subtle or be it blatant, we need to get it out there. Because I have seen where men have chronic illnesses. They are sometimes like stage 4 cancer, and they know they have long in this land of the living, and you know they refuse to cry, and they have all this bottled up grief. So I think that in our culture, you know, we need to encourage the government, NGOs, you know, private companies to allow that space. You know, I know sometimes when there's a debt for employer or employee, they have a certain amount of days you could take, to grieve, and for funeral preparation. But I think we need to have this, not just during a time of a death. We need to have a time when men could grieve whenever they have that feeling. So we don't create that space physically or culturally. We don't have that space. And, in the Caribbean, we tend to focus a lot on joy and happiness. We're more focused, and we believe that's positive. That's fine. But remember, part of life is about loss, is a lot about grieving. And we need to remember that is an emotion too, a human emotion. So it's not just about happiness and being glad, but we also need to remember that that is a human emotion, that we need to have it expressed, and we need to preserve and safeguard.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot of work to be done. And as we continue on not just our journey and let our voices be heard, I think the onus is on the man to first admit that I am grieving. I am not coping. I need help. Because we can reach out as much as we want. And just like the turtle pulls back in his head when he sees someone coming, that's exactly what they do. This is not happening to me. So they need to admit at first, hey, this is not working. This emotion that I'm going through is more than I can handle, and seek help. Yeah?
Very true, very true.
Yeah. So as we continue again, healthy conversation. I totally enjoy what we are doing here. One question that was posed to me, or I feel that should be brought to the fore. People often ask, what role does the funeral home play in male support? And I want to focus a little bit on exactly what we're doing now. This is how we help. This is how Dr. Tilak Singh contributes to us helping. We need to make counseling more available. We need to, many people who tend to like to read. So, if we provide brochures that they can just pick up and take away with them, that would show them how to cope, it would make a difference. Yeah. So while we try to assist them in what they are going through, they also need to be seen. I think that is where we can make a difference. Dr. Tilak Singh, I thank you for engaging me. I thank you for taking the time, and I know together we can work wonders.
I look forward to future collaboration.
Thank you so much. Men, this statement is for you. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight within ourselves. And the loudest pain is the one that we carry in silence. I am giving you a voice and a listening ear. I ask you to come and have the opportunity to share. I thank you.